This podcast was recorded on September 22nd, 2019, but today is March 14th, 2020. Happy birthday, Brian. And I'm going to preface this one a little bit differently. Let's cue the somber piano loop. I got lots of tea to respectfully spill in this intro, but if you want to go straight to two Eugene mayoral candidates chatting it up, skip to about 10 minutes in. If you checked out episode 154 with Mandy Chappell, you know that I'm more than happy to have my electoral opponents on the show. When I do, I treat them the way I would any other guest, with respect, realness, no editing anything out, and with a positive listening attitude. Mandy ultimately decided to leave the mayoral race and endorse me. Robert Patterson did those two things as well, but he kept flip-flopping and sending me a Hitler video and other random inappropriate images with zero remorse. It sucked, because at first I believed in him enough that I was going to support him and run for county commissioner instead. I even announced that decision at a DPLC meeting, and you'll hear my uncertainty about 2020 early in this episode with Robert. Our last interaction was Robert's giving me permission to upload our podcast, but in this intro, I want to run through what I promise is just a limited set of behaviors that concern me enough that I jumped back into the race. I didn't see anyone else in a strong position to challenge and push our well-intentioned mayor of Eugene to get out there, live up to the values she talks about, and communicate more with everyday folks in my generation. There are two specific moments in this episode that led me to jump back in. One, I asked Robert why he was running for mayor, and he sat there with no answer for a very awkward period of time. Two, he told me why he was running for mayor of Portland, not Eugene. This was not just a slip of the tongue, because on his Facebook, he had been talking not long before that about running for mayor of Portland in 2020. Those two communities are extremely different, and it makes me feel like he wants to be Mayor Patterson a bit more than he wants to serve a particular community of Oregonians. But I don't want this to be all conjecture. I have screenshots to show that I'm representing this all fairly and honestly. This week, the NAACP, 350 Eugene, and Beyond Toxics just canceled a candidate forum due to COVID-19, and I genuinely want Eugenians to have access to more info about the candidates in this race. I'm going to jump through parts of our messenger conversation rather quickly, so feel free to pause if you're watching it on video, but it's all chronological and I'll try to explain it all verbally. I'll describe the images shown for the disabled homies too. I see y'all. So, Robert reached out to me for the first time on September 2015. He said, "Hi Thomas, I've heard a lot of good things about you, and as I'm sure you well know, we're pursuing the same part-time $25K a year job with the city of Eugene. We're either fools or geniuses." So he's lighthearted, he's got a Bayard Rustin quote on his headline, and I'm willing to chat with him. I think it's a little weird that he assumed I knew who he was, because I didn't, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt. So, I tried to schedule a meeting with him 4 days later, and I told him that I was likely to run for the county commission. He admitted that he actually was going to try to convince me to get out of the mayoral race. We ended up recording the podcast on September 22nd. I later tell him I was still willing to work with him to build grassroots progressive momentum and plan a joint event. He wanted to plan some work sessions for his housing plan. I should note that when we tried to meet at Cowfish about that, he no-showed. We scheduled another meeting and he was almost an hour late. My concerns grew, and I just don't like being stood up by friends without notice. On November 10th, he decides not to run. He says he'll do anything he can to help my campaign. I thank him sincerely. At almost 2 a.m. the next day, he takes back his statement and looks forward to debating me. Fine by me. This is a guy I've learned only lived in Eugene for about 4 years, all when Piercy was mayor, and he's still got no website even though I encouraged him to get one. By this point, I have Hiura2020.org. I'm 30 issues deep into my Humanity EUG daily news magazine, and I've lived in Eugene for over 20 years. I'm hyped to debate anyone about what kind of new leadership my community needs. Soon enough, he's asking if I want to get an apartment with him, even though I'm running against him. I support that he wants to become housed, but I'm not interested in running my campaign with just a thin layer of drywall between me and one of the folks I'm running against. And now, the weird part. I don't hear from him for several days, maybe weeks, until he hits me up at 3 a.m. one day to ask about my U.S. citizenship. Like, what? I'm a late night person, but I'm trying to sleep at this point. I told him, this is a strange 3 a.m. birther line of questioning, LOL. What inspired it? He doesn't answer that question. I say, not gonna lie, dude, you're my friend, but you're also an opponent. Not an enemy, but an opponent still. so your questions seem out of place and odd. Happy to remain in touch, but anything you send me is liable to get commented on somehow over the course of the campaigns. I'm going to go a little Kyle Kalinske or Anna Kasparian here with the outrage, but come on, dude! I'm giving you the immense gift of telling you I'm going to put this stuff out if you keep doing it. Nevertheless, he persisted. Dude sends me a gif of a lion looking menacing to say I'm being catty. I told him citizenship is an odd thing to randomly question about at 3 a.m. He sends more gifs of children looking exasperated and arm wrestling each other, presumably teasing me for being offended, I guess. I'm getting pretty tired of this, and I am tired at this hour. So I said, I'm going back to rest. Be well. The dude keeps sending me gifs, which are increasingly nonsensical. Party hat people, cats with human mouths, and some kind of infomercial saying, I love to wiggle. At that point, I just want to be left alone. I say, please stop messaging me. He takes the time to send me a gif looking pouty and hurt. Then he sends me a gif of Adolf Hitler doing a Nazi salute. I know you can't see it here, but Hitler extends his arm out, holds a hula hoop, and a dolphin jumps through it. I have no idea why he thought this was appropriate to send to an opponent at this hour after randomly asking me if I'm a citizen. I tell him I don't appreciate that. He replies that he was just playing around. I really don't know this guy, but he's way overconfident about the race at this point, and honestly, after a River Road Community Organization meeting he was also very late to, he condescendingly put his hand on my shoulder and told one of the org members he was going to crush me. This overconfidence continues, and by December, he knows I'm running my own progressive grassroots campaign, probably for mayor of my hometown, and he still wants me to, quote, fill a key spot on his team. He also looks forward to the opportunity to earn my endorsement of him. All of this is just weird, and I gotta say, he told me on September 22nd that he wanted to live up to some advice given to him by a family member, which is never go negative in a campaign. Well, by mid-December, he had changed his tune by posting statuses taking shots at former Mayor Piercy and current city council candidate Tim Morris, and I commented on them to defend those people who have done a lot for this community. He said he doesn't have time for my, quote, bullshit, which is really just me keeping it real. I haven't even mentioned how this is a guy who took an unopened bag of fruit snacks that were sitting in a box in my room and started eating them in front of me while I was tearing down audio equipment. He didn't bother to ask, and when I said I would have appreciated him asking first, he got offended like I was being selfish. Literally my stuff, just picks it up. It was very, very revealing, let's say. So, here's the last thing I ever sent him. It's a little harsh. My comments defending Kitty and Tim were well received and revealed your character. Without an apology from you about the many things I've mentioned here, I will look forward to releasing the full interview as planned. He'd flip-flopped before on whether he wanted me to put it out, which felt like a huge waste of my time and effort to give him exposure at that point. Keeping it real, I only do these once a week right now, and I put a lot into them. I said, Robert, the video objectively shows that you're an intelligent and good-natured Portlander who had no idea why you were running for mayor of this beautiful college town. I hope you might someday see this as a word of harsh but fair advice. Try harder. I think you could be a good Mayor Patterson, but you have to earn it and show basic respect for other leaders and candidates. Be well, Tommy Hiura. He says, that's fine, piss off. I know this whole thing was harsher than you've seen from me, but if Carleton College taught me anything, it's that no one will stand up for you if you don't do it yourself, and if New York taught me anything, it's that you have to be direct with some people or they won't treat you fairly. I would love to sit down with more candidates, and while I recognize that this intro might be seen as alienating by some, by the way, I was once called alienating by Mayor Vinnis, and I wear that as a badge of pride because I think there's a place for disruption in our politics, especially when the establishment controls anything. I'll shut up. I'm going off script. I just was like, this is a guy who so many well-respected members of the community have supported, and it's important that the public has a chance to see how Robert Patterson thinks he can treat a fellow candidate behind closed doors. And this upload honestly wouldn't make sense without some context either. I only ever treated him with realness, kindness, and respect when we were friends, and that's how I'll continue to treat everyone, whether you like less stupid or not. I still do like him as a person. I got love for everyone. That hasn't changed. And I think this is a generally great chat. Now, episode 162. Thanks for checking it out. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of Less Stupid with Thomas Hiura, a podcast that's uncut, uncensored, and very unbelievably happy to have you on the show. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Thomas. I'm Robert Patterson. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, but now I live in Eugene, Oregon.
That's right. But you lived here for a period of time, about 4 years before moving to Portland, correct?
I first moved here on November 1st, 2008. I remember it because the night before I had been in Ashland for Halloween. Ashland throws one of the best Halloween parties this side of anywhere.
Nice. What did you go as?
I didn't wear a costume. I went.
Oh, okay.
I went as myself. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So you came to the best party just to be really average at it.
Well, I'd like to
easy.
think. Right. There was a synergistic effect.
So one thing that's cool about our friendship is that it hasn't always been a friendship. Who knows if it always will be a friendship? We don't know. But we were both going to run for the same office here in Eugene, Oregon. And, maybe we could talk a little more about national politics or something if you don't want to focus too much on this race that we're both very focused on, which you might have mentioned earlier. But I think it's very, very wonderful to see you out there. I'm very impressed by your thoughtfulness on housing, on the stances you've taken so far in the campaign. And
Buffalo stance, Nana Cherry.
Well, what do you think about this? Why are you stepping up to run for mayor?
That's the worst fucking question I've ever fucking heard. How dare you ask me that? Seriously, I will end this right.
Right. This is interesting. I was thinking about calling my podcast Long Pauses because I think there is a place for being reflective.
Okay.
But in that moment, I didn't know where you were going, and I still don't know where you're going with it. But the floor is open. I'll just stop talking because I think that's something podcast hosts need to do sometimes.
I want there are so many ways to answer that question, and being unprepared for it makes my mind consider different ways to answer it. Ultimately, the reason why I was first attracted to the race was because of my involvement as an activist with regards to homeless communities. First, Portland's homeless community, but I've spoken in 6 counties to people that I think heard me well and were in positions to do something about it. About the conditions that I see on the street.
I think it's really conscientious of you to think about homelessness and housing and maybe reframe the dialogue that is so prevalent about street communities in Eugene and in Lane County and all over. Because it's clear that the current mayor is focused on this a lot, but it's a I mean, I don't know if you would agree with that, but it seems that she, having been with shelter care, was thought of as somebody who would be the mayor to make this situation better for everybody involved. And I don't know where I'm going with that. It's more that how do you view homelessness as a problem, or do you view more a problem in how people just respond to or perceive people being on the street?
Well, first of all, I think that there were some significant gains made during the last 3 years with regards to homelessness in Lane County and in Eugene, partly because
Absolutely.
of Mayor Venice, but also because of leadership at the county level in Springfield, partly because of an activist community that is second to none nationwide, partly because of a service organization network that is second to none nationwide. Oregon has led the field in terms of providing meaningful, client-centered services to its homeless community for decades. Outside In is 51 years old now. That's almost as old as Eric Jackson, for God's sake.
He is in his wiser years for sure. Who's Eric Jackson for anyone who might not know? Because I only met him earlier this summer.
If they don't know, then they should Google his name. He's an outspoken activist and has been in Denver, and he's a person that I think a lot of people on the street in Eugene sort of have a lot of love for and hold in high esteem. He's a leader.
He's certainly one of the most forefront people in terms of speaking out about the rights of people living on the street and living throughout Eugene in unhoused situations of various kinds. Absolutely. But there's so much happening on the national front, and that's part of what inspired me to want to run for something in 2020. In terms of so many different avenues through which I've tried to be active and tried to make a change. For example, interning with Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, or interning with Oregon League of Conservation Voters, trying to protect the kind of shit I didn't think we would still be debating about. A woman's right to choose, a person's right to choose, an abortion procedure, or the fact that 415 parts per million is what we're dealing with now in the carbon pollution space. That didn't make a lot of sense, but you get what I'm saying. I'm a little outraged that we're still having some of those conversations.
Pollution Space was the name of my drum and bass duo from 2005.
Is that for real?
We were the Pollution Space Kids.
I was in a band called Elevator Defense Force, but we only ever met on AOL Instant Messenger.
That is...
Yeah. We never, the three of us knew each other, but we never met up and played music together.
Well, I don't know. I was trying to think of a big tech segue, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think are some of the,
Yeah.
One of the frustrations with the national level of politics is that if you study history at all, you know that so many of the challenges of our democracy, of our climate, of women's rights, of the rights of the marginalized, of even things like people's ability to start a small business, these are the kinds of issues that have endured for centuries or decades. And my frustration with national politics is we keep seeing it's really hard for any one person to get anything done significantly. Do you think one person really can make a huge impact or difference in a world now where people are so quick to judge and label and cyberbully and mischaracterize? And for anybody who's being active on any part of the political spectrum, it seems difficult to avoid this intense level of scrutiny from one side if you do anything.
I guess I agree with that to a point, but really I guess that I don't. Barack Obama's election led to the passing of Obamacare, which has insured me better than a decade and a half of waiting tables has.
Right.
Made it possible for me to go on medications that are necessary given my... Anyway, I got off on a tangent there.
It happens. It's okay.
Now.
And mental health is not something to be ashamed of. That's something that I feel very strongly about.
That's a good one.
No. I mean, I thought that was what you're talking about with medications, was possibly a mental health situation.
Oh, no. I'm talking about, I take Truvada for PrEP, which isn't necessary because I'm not, why am I talking about the medicine? My point is that Barack Obama's election led to significant change, I think, not only for my insurance, but for the insurance of people nationwide.
Right. And do try to just talk a little more to the mic.
Now, because
the only thing is this fan is defective, and the farther you get away, the more I have to increase the gain for the whole sound file. And people are going to be like, what's that fan?
Now, did he do it alone? No, of course not. He led a campaign to defeat a worthy opponent, really multiple worthy opponents in 2008. And then
Edwards, Clinton, McCain.
It was
Biden was in that one.
And then had to sort of steer this bill through Congress and the Senate. Like tons of work went into it, right? Tons of work went into getting this passed.
Absolutely.
So can we say that, the change is because of him, because of one person?
I mean, Hillary Clinton advocated for many of the same policies that went into Obamacare.
But she didn't get it passed.
I know, but I'm saying that she did a lot of the frontier trailblazing of getting it to be a more accepted kind of policy. Then you had Mitt Romney did a lot of the same kind of policies that are in the ACA in Massachusetts as well.
Yeah, the nation was primed for it. We still didn't get we still didn't get what we needed.
Well, I know my dad and so many longtime Democrats that were just pissed for a long time that the U.S. isn't taking care of its sick. That's been the status quo, and we're trying to move farther out of that.
Well, and it's still the case for a large number of people, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so the Medicare for All is a very interesting point of contrast if we're talking about national politics between the people that we're looking at as our presidential candidates, as potential presidential candidates to go up against Donald Trump in 2020. And you have Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang and people who are saying Medicare for all. I'm not sure if Yang's version of that legislation does this, but Warren's and Sanders completely abolishes private insurance, which is a point of difference between them and some of the other candidates like Pete Buttigieg, who thinks that private insurance should still be allowed to operate. And if people do find that that is a better option than the government plan that is available to everybody, he calls it Medicare for all who want it. Then he says that we should trust people to make that choice. I'm just curious, not necessarily, do you think we should ban private insurance? But, the Democrats having such frivolous banter, like especially with John Delaney, and people like Amy Klobuchar, the more centrist people, possibly dividing each other up way too much about who has the specifics of a healthcare plan, and so few people are voting on just that issue.
I'm not qualified to get into the weeds on federal health insurance. I will say that it seems to me that the way we approach wellness is fundamentally flawed.
Say more about that.
Well,
I don't agree.
Well, we've let institutions build up in these systems that we expect government or industry or communities to provide. So you end up with these capitalists. Well, you end up with companies, with corporations doing the business of the people. Now, I believe that healthcare is a public good and is right to be. I believe that it is the proper role of government to ensure that every American has access to a certain standard of care, regardless of anything. And not just every American, but every inhabitant Every person here
gonna say,
deserves
how do we
the
talk
benefit
about
of our
undocumented?
world-class medical universities and hospitals, and we can do that in a way that honors investors for their investment, that honors doctors for their time and their risk.
Right.
But you asked me how to fix it on a federal scale. Jesus Christ.
Okay,
let's fix
myself.
Let's fix it on a neighborhood scale. That's where my mind's at right now.
Okay. Sounds municipal.
But honestly, I will take whatever the overlord gets as long as just keep the Truvada coming.
So, what an interesting state of the world where we don't have a full recognition of mental health and physical health, and we think of them as so separate from each other. Because although I do have some upper back issues, I'm pretty physically healthy.
Well, we think of them separate from each other because they're different. I mean, they're different. They are different. They are separate.
Are they?
Absolutely.
Mental health and physical health. There's a clear separation between them.
We can talk about like biological and mechanical causes of mental disorder, right? But
I think we have a real point of disagreement here, though.
I mean, we can talk. I mean, that's where psychology and psychiatry are heading. The study of behavior is becoming more and more linked with physical mechanism, but still, they're just two separate things in the way patients present with it, in the way that patients feel about themselves when they're going through it, in the way that doctors think. I mean, they're two separate industries.
Industries. See,
Yes,
that's an interesting word to bring in, because
there are
I wasn't sure if we
industries.
would agree on this or not, but I think it's pretty clear from just my observations of the world that we have an artificial distinction we look at between mental and physical health, when the brain is very much a part of your body like anything else.
Sure.
And there are serious linkages between depression and, I mean, at least some kinds of pains and stress
Absolutely.
and back issues. And I'm not saying that a chiropractor should then be somebody's therapist, but I think that if you want to talk about like rebuilding healthcare at the neighborhood level, small level, let's look at holistically, looking at what is ailing a person, right? It could be a mental health issue that was in their developmental years that has seriously prevented them from being able to achieve well in school, and then they feel bad about their own ability, and then because we've had this reinforced model that if you don't get A's in school, somehow you're not as valuable, and my point is that with this distinction we have between mental and physical health, very few people will see somebody who is on crutches and think that person is permanently messed up. Mostly, we would say that person is temporarily on crutches because they have a sprained ankle, or they have something in their leg that doesn't say a whole lot about them as a person. Maybe they're a little reckless or something, or I don't know, they got into an accident. But what frustrates me is that we would take a person who has generalized anxiety disorder and PTSD and, could be maybe triggered by things that they're confronted with, and I don't know. And then we think, well, that person's weak. We think that person is flawed. We don't think of it as the kind of thing that can be treated accordingly as much as I wish. And I mean, as a person who's really, really focusing now on Lane County, it's devastating that between 2000 and 2016, I don't know the exact number. That's why this is a podcast. I think it was at least an 80% increase in suicides in Lane County. It's an epidemic in Lane County. Of course, we know that suicides are on the rise nationally as well. So that's one of the struggles I have as somebody who's entering local politics, is being unsure when to try to raise, a hubbub about my local leaders not getting things done when, I mean, how can we... Yeah. The best that unfortunately liberal and progressive people can do, because I'm generally liberal and progressive.
Are you against suicide then?
Am I against suicide?
Yes.
I think that suicide is seriously an indicator of a society's health. So I am not against people's right to, in some situations, like terminally ill people, to go through euthanasia. But I absolutely would tell you that I think a country with a very high suicide rate compared to a country with a lower one needs to evaluate why that's the case. Because, I mean, it's generally true. People don't want to. It's a sad way to die. It's a very sad way to die. It's a sad way to lose somebody because everybody tends to think, what could I have done? And I also think in terms of suicide, we have a lot of rhetoric about it was a cowardly act. Some people would say, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well,
because you seem to have feelings about this.
Well, I have feelings about liberty, and while I agree with you that suicide does seem to be an indicator of a society's ability to provide fulfilling life, or at least, to provide a community that values fulfilled life.
Right.
And I think it's proper for government to attend to people's health.
Sure.
But suicide is a very personal choice that I can't begin to understand because I'm not suicidal.
Okay, but you've never been suicidal.
No,
I've been extraordinarily extraordinarily sounds kind of presumptuous, but I was May 2017 especially, very, very, very certain that there was nothing to do except end my life or just wait, do nothing, like try to stay alive every day, and that was a challenge, because I think I've heard people say this, that when you are very suicidal, that's kind of the mentality that you should have, is that, you know what, I'm just not gonna do the action. Like often people have an ideation, right? Mm-hmm. And then you just decide, I'm not gonna go through with that, or now is not the time, this is not the hour, today's not the day I'm gonna die. And you just keep doing that until you build up enough resilience, and I'm not saying I can make anyone unsuicidal, right? It's something that I don't deal with on a day-to-day basis now. I would tell you there's still times, rare times when I have a consideration about it, but even then I think, one of the things that's also that's also challenging with mental health, and we don't have to talk about this too much, honestly, is that it looks so different to what illness is, like for a person like me who has bipolar disorder, so they tell me. Me being hypomanic could look like just me being very cheerful. You know what I mean? Okay. But if somebody has, I don't know why I thought syphilis was the first thing I thought, or SARS, anything. The symptoms are readily identifiable and kind of physically there. So I guess I get what you're saying there on the mental and physical distinction.
I mean, and that's been the challenge of the study of the mind since before the 1800s. How do we observe the unobservable? How do we, right? Surveys and direct observation can only take you so far, and it got us classical. It got us sort of
Pavlov.
And there's good solid stuff in that. To be used for a variety of positive or nefarious ends. Yeah, it troubles me to think about suicide being clustered in groups that are already, that I believe are already marginalized.
Like what groups?
Well, the homeless, youth, the LGBTQIA community.
Right. That's certainly true.
Veterans returning from war.
Right.
PTSD survivors,
right.
Survivors of domestic abuse. I mean, yeah. But
it is fascinating, though, that it skews towards, it's a disproportionately white problem in the United States. That's fascinating.
Well, the United States is I don't. Race is sort of a social construction. When you say white,
very
what do you
much
mean?
So.
What do you mean when you say white? Do you mean white
a good
and not
question.
of Hispanic or Latino origin? Do you mean purely white?
I would probably. You're gonna have to ask people to self-identify when you talk about what people's race is. So, I mean, I think when I talk about white people, I'm talking about anybody who would identify themselves as white. And to not identify as white, you have to have a good reason. This is kind of. I want to make this kind of a podcast, like a comedy podcast, right? Okay. So I'm white, but I'm also Asian, and I don't know what that means because sometimes I look really white, and sometimes I look more Asian, and it often depends on who I'm with, who I'm seen with. When I'm with a bunch of Asian people, I blend in just generally
so
fine.
then maybe we're talking about issues of ethnicity rather than issues of race. You're talking about issues.
My understanding
of
from a Das Racist lyric, especially, is wondering if suicide is a largely white trend. Google it later and confirm that. Then. It's they're funny as hell. I wish they would get back together. If you're listening out there still, just know this is also a hip hop podcast, hip hop comedy news. It's interview-ish type discussions, and it's just about education too. It's about being less stupid.
I'm Robert Patterson. I started college at the University of Texas at Austin as a film major. Didn't graduate though. Hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em horns. Right. Well, it's an excellent public university. Always ranked in the top 5 of public universities.
Great law
right up there with
school
UNC Chapel Hill and University of Michigan Ann Arbor.
I'll tell you a fun fact.
I've coached way too many kids about how to get into schools, and really, it's not as important as people think. What school you go to? Be happy and learn what you love.
Oh, it's more important what eating club you join.
Yes, man. I spent 3 summers at Princeton. They got them eating clubs.
Okay,
that's real. Eating clubs. What?
Let's see. After I dropped out of the University of Texas at Austin, I dropped out of Northern Virginia Community College, which is actually one of the largest community colleges in the nation. Fun story about University of Texas at Austin, though. While I was a freshman there, I lived in Jester Center, which was, at the time, the nation's largest dormitory. Now, it is 2 towers connected by a freaking situation full of people.
Right.
And when I was a freshman there, 3,200 people lived in Jester Center. World's largest dormitory. No matter what they say in what's the capital? What's the capital of Maryland? Annapolis.
Annapolis, indeed.
Yeah. There's a large dormitory at Annapolis, but it's actually 5 separate towers. So I'm saying that it's on a different.
Cool.
It's like comparing a.
I love that area of the country. It is damn humid, though. This is a weather podcast now too. That's a joke. I will never talk about the weather. If I'm talking about the weather with somebody, it's probably because I don't know what to say.
It's earthquake weather today.
Absolutely. I'm going to have a few more guests on the podcast too. We'll probably go for another 15 minutes or so. And so whatever you want to talk about, we can talk about it, man. But I'm probably going to have, there are 3 people who've said they would do it. Ty Williams of the Sunrise Movement here in Eugene, fighting hard to get youth organized to stop climate change and to support the Green New Deal. Kitty Piercy, who was the most recent mayor of Eugene, who is not the current mayor, and she was a 3-term mayor from working backwards 2004 to 2016. And she's a lovely human being. And Representative Julie Fahey, who represents House District 14 in the state capitol. And she is a great fighter for progressive values in writing state laws.
Those are heavy hitters you've got coming up.
And you're a heavy hitter if you're really going to win. But let me keep it real with you. This show's about keeping it.
I'm going to bunt and run like hell.
Okay, dog. Let me put you on the spot, and you let me know if I'm getting too aggressive. But here's my thing, is I think you could win. But I'm not confident that you're going to win. It's very hard to unseat an incumbent.
Join the team. You should join the
hard.
team, and I can tell you about my plan to win, and about ways that you can help out.
And I would love to. Yeah, man. So you said everything in due time, but like, where's we got Mayor Venice has a website. I have a website. Tim Morris for City Council. Ryan Moore. Hoeli Boa for South Eugene County Commissioner. Many of these people, their web presence is at this stage more established than yours, And don't you think that? Do you feel like you're playing catch up?
No, not at all.
Okay. So tell me then. Okay, let's talk about your plan. How are you going to win?
Well, I'm going to put together a coalition of voters, put together a great organization, and then we're going to work like hell to get everybody to the polls.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. And activating young voters and
Young,
maybe university. It's something we had talked about.
I think every politician in Eugene wants to activate UO, not just UO, but LCC, Northwest Christian, go Beacons.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know the best way in a town like Eugene. How do you get your message out to everybody? I mean, besides knocking on everybody's door, which mathematically I probably can't do. I probably cannot knock on every door in my district.
Oh, you don't need to knock on every door. You need to knock on the doors that you know are going to support you and 5% of the others. You need to knock on.
That's the conventional wisdom. I love it. What I want to do is take a little teeny tiny wrecking ball, if they exist, to the conventional wisdom.
Okay.
And I want to build a broader coalition. For example, Yang Gang 2020 for president. I love Andrew Yang. Mm-hmm. I also love Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And I think Buttigieg is brilliant. And I think Harris is brilliant in her way. And Biden's not even a bad dude, in my opinion. But I love everybody, so it's hard to... I mean, I really do love everybody. That's something that's true about me, even though I'm a tough person and I'm a direct person. I have love for everybody. So for me, Yang has been touting the fact that he is the only one of two candidates besides Bernie Sanders who 10% of Trump's voters say they will support. That's sad. And that's 10%. So that's double what you said in terms of you maybe roughly 5% of the people that are maybe on the other side of the political spectrum that you want to try to talk to. But frankly, especially we're both running nonpartisan races. So why have that idea about, I need to only get, half and then, maybe 5% of the other folks. I want to talk to every single person.
Well,
that I can.
I guess...
county government, municipal government, we want anyone to get the good work done that needs to get done. No one's thinking as much about a D or an R on a ballot because it's not on the ballot.
Well,
I'm just going to make sure this is still filming.
Yeah. I'm going to play some string cheese incident real quick. No, I can't. I don't have an electric octave tune mandolin. 8 strings, I think. 8 strings. Let's see. That was a lot of good stuff that you just said. And
well, we're doing a podcast, man. You come correct when you're going to talk to me.
Okay. You asked why I want to be mayor of Portland. I want to be mayor of Portland because I believe that the homeless should be a protected class, and I believe that the current mayor hasn't done right by the homeless community in Eugene. Now,
here's my concern. You said Portland.
Hang on.
You said Portland, man.
Wait, where am I running? We're in Maine, and I'm running for. I have a lot of love for Portland.
Absolutely, and I know that recently you were thinking about running for mayor of Portland.
Who hasn't thought about running for the mayor?
I've never once thought about running for that. I don't live there.
Well, I lived in Portland, and I thought about running for mayor there.
That's fair. Against Wheeler.
Against Wheeler, He is. And there's at least one other good candidate out there. I'm sure there's. Well, I imagine that there will be many by the time the primary comes around.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ted Wheeler.
Good.
But having said that, in many ways, he hasn't done fully right by the homeless community of Portland. This is the thing. No mayor has done right by any homeless community in this country.
That's a big statement because there are many, many mayors. Hundreds of thousands, probably. I mean, I get what you're saying, though. It's just I'm such a stickler with specificity of language.
Then
sometimes.
find me a mayor that has done right by by their city's homeless, and because I want to know what they've done.
Okay.
And we should be repeating it in every goddamn city from here to the restaurant at the end of the universe.
A good friend of mine had positive things to say about Providence, Rhode Island's approach. However, I have not even looked into it at all.
Yeah.
So I'm just relaying that it came from a friend who's a smart person, but I don't even agree with him politically very much. I mean, really, I love being friends with people I disagree with. It's way more fun. I'm not a contrarian to the extent I disagree with people just to have fun arguments. But hell yeah, if there's a difference between us, I want to talk about it. Let's open up about it.
For a city, for a mayor to do right by its homeless.
And they're only paid like $24K in Eugene. That's part-time, and they bust their butt.
For any mayor of any American city to do that, there would need to be a president that thought that homelessness should be a protected class. Well, or at least a president willing to provide willing to stake their presidency on it. Honestly, in
Sanders just put out a $2.5 trillion plan for housing. And he truly believes that nobody should be without a safe place to sleep and a roof over their head.
Well,
and he wants to make a giant federal investment in that. Now, the criticism against him always is, how are you going to actually get it done?
Well,
but I would love to run a little bit.
As much as I love Bernie,
Okay.
I think he'd have challenges dealing with the Democratic caucus of Congress and Senate. He's had a lifetime as an independent,
exactly.
and I love Bernie, and I
wish people kind of understood more what that means.
But that's a challenge for him, I think.
I have at
unless
times
he's elected
floated
with
the
some sort
possibility
of clear
of
mandate.
If I run for a
Because
nonpartisan
a
artist,
lot of Congress people worried
office.
about re-election if Bernie gets elected. He's a polarizing figure to the right, and I say that as a Bernie fan.
Right.
I'm just talking.
I think
about
people forget about just how populist 2016 was, because we had an enormous wave of basically unprecedented levels of support for two outsider candidates. One of them was someone who just didn't get the nomination. And I will not tell you that Hillary Clinton didn't have support. She had a ton of support. People underestimate that too sometimes. They act like she didn't run a good campaign, and really she did kind of sputter out and not put in the effort the last few months.
Is Bernie Sanders
a populist?
That outside of the mainstream? If
you want to win mayor in Eugene, I truly believe you should not. I don't think you can tell people that Bernie Sanders is part of the establishment.
He's a well-funded liberal senator from a northeastern state. He comes from a tradition of mainstream, albeit left, political thought.
No. I don't agree. I mean, it was not mainstream to fight for civil rights in the 60s. It just wasn't. I mean, that we look at it now.
John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson fought for civil rights in the 60s.
Not as ardently. They didn't put their bodies on the line like Sanders did, They
LBJ
did it because politically they had to.
In the antebellum South.
Absolutely. And he's on the record saying a bunch of racial slurs.
64. He fought for the Civil Rights Act of 64 like he was a patrician in Cambridge. He showed great courage and distinction fighting for the civil rights of Americans.
Okay. And that doesn't mean it was mainstream, though. I mean, my point, I think, let's go back to Sanders.
It wasn't his stance on civil rights that ended up costing him his presidency. It was the military-industrial complex and the weirdness of domino theory in the Cold War.
Which I recently learned, the military-industrial complex, Eisenhower wanted to call it the military-industrial congressional complex. The Congress people didn't want to be that directly associated with it, but you're goddamn right they are.
Is that right?
It's true.
I didn't know that.
That's what I learned at the DPLC Central Committee meeting the other day.
I did not know that.
Where were you at, dog? I expect to see you at everything. Are you a Democrat?
Yeah, of course I am.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And not to say that I would hate you if you weren't.
Who was?
I am really trying to talk to people all across the spectrum.
Tell me about
of
the
this
DPLC
podcast.
meeting. Who was there? What was? Fill me in on it. Give me the scoop.
As a teacher in training, the most impressive thing was they had everybody in about 5 rows facing the long wall, and then they all had everybody turn to the left wall. So it turned into like 14 rows. It was amazing. What happened at the fucking meeting? The typical, PCP people, like precinct committee people getting like my form. It took weeks for some reason I don't know what happened with it, but so I think it was the first central committee meeting in quite a while. It was my first one, period. So I'm not going to give you the most articulate of synopses about something that was my first experience because it's a little bit hard to get up to speed on those kinds of formal Robert's rules like events. I think that's one of the reasons young people don't pay attention to politics as much. Nobody can turn on C-SPAN and understand exactly. I mean, it doesn't appeal, and it's not as accessible as I'd like politics to be.
I remember when
I want politics to be accessible.
When I was in high school, we government students did sort of a group project every spring called Mock Congress, where we would pick. I think I was a junior senator from Texas. We would pick different. We would form caucuses. And we would try to get bills passed through our mock Congress, and that was a great. Looking back on it now, that was a really great experience that I hope is still being done.
Mock Congress. Well,
hi, Ms. Giannini.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Civics is something my dad really wants us to have in all schools. You just gave Miss Ivy a weird look.
Miss Ivy
Okay.
taught Miss Ivy taught AP British history, which I did not take, but she was the coach of our Battle of the Brains team, which is like a 4-person quiz bowl style on PBS broadcasting show. Anyway,
that's cool.
Miss Ivy, Miss Giannini.
Okay, well, anyway, so you got great teachers. I had great teachers. Otherwise, I never would have considered being a teacher. Especially because the entirety of the time that I was growing up and, I don't know, a thinking person, like age 10 and up at least, we faced immense budget shortcomings in 4J, Eugene School District 4J, in the state of Oregon at large. I'm sure it's actually probably worse in a lot of rural school districts. And so you had this dissonance of being like, a teacher like Miss Downey, Mr. Ball, Miss Skurlock, Miss Tommen, Mr. Frankel. I had a lot of great educators, and you end up feeling like, wow, they're cool people. They are esteemed in society. They're important. They give me my grades. They confer knowledge onto us at large in groups. It's amazing what they do. But then you discover, and everybody knows, teachers are not paid well, especially if you think about by the hour. I think as a teacher, you have to just completely get rid of the idea of like thinking about how much you're making by the hour. Because if you're a good teacher, there's hardly an hour that goes by in your life during the school year where you're not thinking about the kids. You're not thinking about your students, unless it's like the syllabus week, but even then you're probably overwhelmed. And so if you think, and I don't sleep a whole lot. So 18 hours a day, eep. And then if you think about weekends, it's like you have to just totally reframe it and think, okay, we're going to fix the state budgeting issues. We're going to make teaching a more esteemed thing in society. Why the hell you think I named the podcast Less Stupid? Some people are going to think it's combative and aggressive. I don't give a shit. Less stupid is a virtue. I get that it's negative and not positive, but I'm not going to make a podcast called Be More Smart. That's presumptuous. That's silly.
Yeah.
But less stupid, and I want to ask everybody. Oh wow, we're at 45 minutes, so I really don't want to go more than an hour. Well, we're close to 45 minutes anyway.
Okay.
And so what's a way that you think people could be less stupid?
Neonatal vitamins. I'm sorry, prenatal vitamins and then neonatal vitamins.
Okay.
And plenty of hydration. And extras to see string people. Cheese incident at the Cuthbert Amphitheater. That also...
Are they paying you for this?
No, I need to get in. I got... Waiting for a miracle.
You are. Okay, right on. Cool, dude. I feel like we should end with a bang of some sort.
Oh, okay, let's get it on.
And the bang is... Here's a personal story. I as a person who is anxious a lot of the time, and maybe just as a person who loves questions and answering questions and searching for knowledge, when I'm asked a question and I don't get the chance to fully finish my answer, somehow it like lingers in my head. And I need to get over it, you know?
I interrupt. That's
no. It's
I'm
a
a very
podcast.
aggressive.
We interrupt each other. It's okay. That's what I would say in this space. You know, so we
LBJ
have
2020
guidelines around the space. And so resolutions. We passed a bunch of resolutions at the DPL seating.
What was resolved?
There's one about relating to increasing participation in the Democratic primary process. Collective bargaining between SEIU Local 49 and Mackenzie Willamette Medical Center.
Okay.
One relating to the UFCW Local 555 collective bargaining dispute against Fred Meyer and Kroger Company stores.
So the resolutions were in support of the service employees.
Absolutely.
And
you can look at it right here, but it's probably not the most entertaining thing to do on a podcast.
Was there any controversy? Was there any fun? Was there any gossip?
There was a number of committee elections. So, okay, let me break it down for anybody who doesn't really know what it's like to be part of a local major political party, but Democratic Party of Lane County is a group with a solid community of support, but they also have to send people to Democratic Party of Oregon committee meetings, and the Democratic Party Congressional District 4 in Oregon has a committee. So we elected people to go sit on those committees. Essentially. So it was a good meeting, and there were two elected officials there. A third one came in.
Who was there?
Lisa Fragola, Julie Fahey, and so Fragola is on the Lane Community College Board of Education.
Oh, okay.
Is that right? Board of Directors, as is Matt Keating, who is there, and Julie Fahey, who I admire. I think she's just she's an excellent legislator in terms of being really communicative. Maybe I'll end with this. I really am frustrated by people who get into office and then get so comfortable that they don't actually have to do much to get reelected. And because of this really nice person, passive-aggressive Eugene culture that we have, and I love Eugene, I'm just naming a problem I see, is that people don't want to challenge, the people who are in power. Or it's not worth it to do it. I mean, let's say you run a small business. That's like that's 70 hours a week or whatever. It's an absurd amount of commitment. You can't run a campaign against a state rep. My state rep's been there since 2006. I don't care if she hears this. I don't care if any Democrat hears this, because this is on my heart. She is a nasty person to people. She, in private meetings, is very, very cruel and harsh, and she was really, really rude to me when I was just a bellhop. I still am. At Hilton Eugene when it was Hilton, and she rolled up, being very entitled, and was very upset that her parking spot wasn't blocked off for her, and I believe she was late, so she was upset that she was going to be late for a speaking engagement. Frankly, cool, Representative Nathanson, you're a state rep. Congratulations, you've been my state rep. You've written a lot of good laws, but that doesn't mean you get to treat people like crap. What do you think?
I don't think anybody.
I'm not
gets
trying to throw you into
people.
my beef with someone.
I don't think anybody. Hey, I got your back. Yeah. As long as it doesn't,
because we look for moral leadership as well as policy. We have a moral leadership crisis in this country.
Okay.
Can I say something that's a little more conservative?
Please.
Podcast. One of the amazing functions that, let's say, evangelical Christian communities, but all sorts of religious communities in this country have held, is spiritual guidance for people. So whether it's a person who, their family is supporting them through, attending church services, attending youth group, singing together, being with the church for camp outs, all this cool stuff I did when I was in high school. The world is a place where it's a little bit hard to find spiritual leaders, I think. And being spiritual is something that I think is a worthwhile thing, even if you are an atheist or an agnostic. maybe that's just my way of saying what inward reflection about who you are is, though. I think of that as being spiritual. So when I think of, I don't know, like I'm a Christian, and I love being in communion with other people who share my faith. And you know, when I'm thinking of, for example, this is an extraordinary example. 2 days ago, or was it yesterday? We had the climate. It was yesterday, wasn't it?
Well, there's been a full
Right.
weekend of events.
Okay, true. But the big sort of kickoff was at the Wayne Morris Free Speech Plaza, and all these Sunrise Movement activists advocating for a Green New Deal, which, by the way, is a fucking great idea. I should do a whole episode about the Green New Deal, because I wish everybody knew what the New Deal was and how important it was getting everybody jobs. We should do that with clean energy jobs. My point is, driving away from that, 2 different license plates I saw in the same drive that said, digit, GND. 2 of them. See, the first one is when I thought, you know what, God, that's beautiful. We should fight harder for that. The second one is when I thought, I think there's probably a reason why I was supposed to see that, or I think it's good that I saw that, and what can I do more to help? Besides driving Leafy Green over there, my fully electric vehicle. I love you, Leafy Green. Are you spiritual?
I am, and one thing that spirituality has led me to believe is that the most beautiful, the most gracious gift that any person can offer to the world is their honesty, their story.
I like that.
And extras to see string cheese incident at
He really
the
wants to
world
see
famous
string cheese
Cuthbert Amphitheater.
I hope I get this out soon, because there's a chance this doesn't go out for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks.
Then you're going to have to develop time travel.
Well, I mean, it's fucking string cheese incident. They're here like every other weekend, it feels like.
And I would never get tired of seeing them. They are the hardest working band in show business.
Love it. This was Less Stupid with Thomas Hiura. Robert, thank you so much for joining me on what I might release as the first episode, but what chronologically is the first episode for sure. And we're so glad to have everybody with you.
Play us out with some Little Nas X.
Well, I'm gonna take my horse to the hotel road. I don't know the chords. I got the horses in the back.
Yes.
I feel like I was going to have a sign out. Oh, yeah. Please, if you're still listening, Hugh.2020.org, check it out. And it would be really helpful to have a donation. It really would. I learned when I was interning with Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, when you have a donation ask, don't be shy and apologetic about it. So when you're on the phone banking, don't say, would you like to make a contribution of $50 today? Don't have that upward inflection. If anything, go downward with your inflection and say, Mr. Patterson, can we count on you to make a $40 contribution today?
That reminds me of a Sarah Silverman routine.
I love her.
It's like
she's so fucking funny.
It's not appropriate for me to say, but it involves.
It's always appropriate. This is the podcast where this is the very end. This is after the sign off. Nobody is still paying attention.
It involves a vulgar word being said with a very blank expression, and I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to. Trump.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Fuck horns.
Hey, Panini, don't you be a meanie.